Welcome to the Reaper's Den, where nightmares come true. I'm your host, Matt. We have a very different video today. Usually it's about Halloween animatronics. Today we're branching off to more broad things that are scary. And today we're talking about monsters. Not just any type of monster though. Specifically, something we don't hear a lot about, I feel like. Tall humanoids, okay, we hear about that, but with melted looking faces. I found two stories, personal encounters from Reddit, and other than that, I can't find any explanation for these. So I'll be offering my breakdown, explanations, and opinions, and some possible explanations that other people came up with. So nonetheless, let's get into the first story. So the first encounter comes from the Redditor, Stalk Me Silly. In the story, the OP claims, this took place around 16 years ago, before I moved to Norway. I lived in Southern California, where I was born and raised, and where the incident took place. I'm not exactly sure if I was 16 or 17 years old at the time, but it was somewhere around there. I'm close with my mom and my grandma, and we lived together at this time. In the afternoons, it was common that we would run our errands together and maybe pick up dinner before going back home. One afternoon, I went along with my grandma on a trip to the pharmacy. The pharmacy was in a strip mall shopping center that we visited often because our bank, grocery store, and favorite Chinese food place were also located there. Anyway, this afternoon, I sat in the passenger seat of my grandma's car while she went inside the pharmacy. It was still daylight, and the parking lot had a lot of normal amount of cars and people walking into the stores. The parking spots nearest to the side of the car I was sitting on were not taken, so there were probably 2 or 3 empty spaces next to me. While I was sitting in the car, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye, so I turned my head and saw something standing in an empty spot a few spots over from me from our car. What I saw shocked me. It was a very tall figure, maybe 8 feet. It resembled a human male, except the face had no distinguishing features other than looking extremely melted. This is the part I find difficult to explain. The face wasn't melted as in dripping looking. It looked more like a peach color melted wax or plastic face. I don't remember seeing eyes, but just places where eyes should be. It also had a very high and unnatural hairline. The hair it had resembled an extremely frizzy Brillo pad that was melted, burned onto the head. I think the color was rust. I do not remember what it was wearing. It was standing there and waving excitingly at me. Its arms were just waving eagerly at me. It was like a friend who was excited to see me. The moment I looked at it, I was so shocked and scared that I immediately looked away. I had a horrible feeling from seeing it, but mostly I was stunned. I remember saying, WTF, WTF, WTF in my head. When I turned my head away from it, it was immediately at my window. It didn't walk or run. It just suddenly, it was there in an instant. I was looking straight ahead while it was there at my window. It seemed to be bent over at the waist, and its face was really close to the glass. It was still having its hand in an annoying and crazed greeting. I didn't know what to do. The fear felt like a punch to the gut. I was a dumb teenager, so I pretended to be changing to the radio channel, ignoring it. After a moment, I didn't see it in the corner of my eye at the window. I turned my head to look, nothing there. I locked the car door, looked in the mirror, nothing there. I looked all around the parking lot from inside the car, nothing. If it were a person, I should have been able to see it walking away from the car or walking into a store. This thing just vanished. I was so freaked out, I became emotional and started crying. My grandma came back to the car from the pharmacy and I told her what happened. She could see I was obviously upset. She listened to what happened as we drove home. When we arrived home, I went straight to my mom and told her what happened too. I was still in tears and she comforted me. They both believed me, but I could barely believe it myself. I've had a hard time telling this story for a long time because I would become teary trying to tell it. It was scary, and it was such an uncomfortable feeling to see someone that I know could not be human. I don't know what that thing was, but I know that if I were to see something similar between then and now, I would have went to the doctor to discuss possible schizophrenia because I'm sure what I saw and it just doesn't make sense. We continued to run our errands at that shopping center, but I never sat alone in the car again. I also remember declining to join my mom on a late night trip to the pharmacy just some years ago because it would be dark. I don't want to see anything like it again. A few things that I remember that I want to add. I have been around this shopping center my whole life. I have not heard of anyone having my usual incidents there. It's not a creepy place. It's literally just a buzzing little strip mall. It was not a person in a costume. The figure was way too tall and it was way too fast when it teleported or whatever to my window. When it was at the window, it seemed to be smiling. I wouldn't look directly at it when it was at the window, but I saw its expression in the corner of my eye. I'm not afraid of clowns, but it did seem clownish in behavior. Example, the way it was waving at me furiously and smiling. I had not seen it or heard of Slender Man or saw any movie like it around the time. I was not interested in horror films and I wasn't yet reading horror ghost stories on the internet. The figure was not see-through, misty, or anything ghostly, just extremely real and horrifying to look at, yet not of this world. I don't have any psychological conditions. I wasn't experimenting in spells or Ouija boards, and I was not using drugs and alcohol, so I can rule those out. Has anyone else seen or heard of something like this, or have any idea what happened? So yeah, creepy. Tall humanoids are common traits within common folklore creatures, the rake, the skinwalker. None that I ever heard of have melted looking faces like the way she describes. And this happened in broad daylight. Did nobody else see this? Was it a hallucination? Was it like a paranormal thing that only she could see? Well, it's hard to think about an explanation, but a Reddit user by the name GoldenTalus70 offers this explanation. I always try to find a logical explanation first. I didn't even know this was a thing until I looked it up, but it could have been this. From WebMD. Prosopometamorphosia. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Often called demon face syndrome, this is a rare neurological disorder that alters the perception of faces. People with PMO see the exact same people and features as everyone else, but their brain misinterprets the facial geometry, causing eyes, noses, or mouths to appear heavily warped, stretched, or melting. It is often linked to structural abnormalities, lesions, or trauma in the brain. The duration and frequency of PMO depends entirely on the underlying cause. While some people experience persistent daily distortions, others experience brief, isolated episodes. Small seizures located in the visual cortex or temporal lobe can cause sudden temporary facial distortions. If a person has a single isolated seizure, they may only see the distortion once in their lifetime. It could have been waving at someone else, like flagging down a ride. If they got in a car, that could explain why they seemed to disappear. Maybe they saw you looking at them and walked over to your car? OP responds, "This is very interesting. Thank you for this. I'd honestly love for this to be the case because I can't make any sense of it any other way. The only problem is that it wasn't flagging someone down for a ride. It was actively beside me, focused, and elevated over me. Also, there wasn't enough time for it to get in a car and drive away. It literally disappeared." So I agree with OP here. This may explain the distorted facial features, but she said the thing was 8 feet tall. There's no way that this could have been the case, right? However, to make her feel a little better, she wasn't alone. A user by the name SFD6546 responded to the story with a similar experience. It reads as so. Wow, I had something similar happen to me on a New York City subway back in late 2011. I have struggled to find words to describe the melted look of the face. Melted is close, but in a plastic, less organic way than a burn victim, per se. And not scar tissue. In my case, it was two, a man and a woman. And they didn't wave, but they both smiled, empathetic, huge grins, like they were more excited to be there and to see me than anything ever. I also wanted to turn and ask people behind me if they saw what I saw, but I had a feeling that they could somehow hear me no matter how quiet. Almost like they were able to read my mind, and I felt sort of like I didn't want to be rude, but also like they knew I knew they were supposed to be there. But I needed to act as if everything was normal. We could be right as rain, or else there might be problems more severe than violating the social contract, being rude, and viscerous embarrassment. I will never be able to forget those faces and energy beaming off them. I believe you saw something similar seeming. There was a couple music videos that had people with exaggerated features, like Michael Gondry video for the Foo Fighters with the big hand. Before that, the even more grotesque Black Hole Sun. And then he goes into music videos and, try to find something similar, which I will include a picture of. So one thing that stands out about both of these stories is that they're both out in public, out in the open, broad daylight. Like one is in the strip mall and the other one is in the subway, New York City subway. So I know that thing was packed. You would think that other people would be concerned if they saw that, but no one's reacting. The guy even says, the second story poster even says, like, I'm thinking about, asking people, do you see that? But I think if they saw that, they would have been saying something. It makes you wonder, was all this just like a similar hallucination shared by two individuals, or maybe really some sort of entity that just manifested itself for one person? A ghost that manifests itself with one person is a common trait within paranormal encounters I feel like I've heard of, but there's no evidence for the paranormal, so this is just weird and unexplained. The truth is, we'll never know. There's no scientific evidence, but it just makes you think, like, if this happened to you, how would you react? They explain just an energy coming off of it, and if you get a bad feeling, it's probably best to listen to it. That's all for today. Thank you for joining the Reaper's Den. If you enjoy this kind of content, please like and share, comment, keep the algorithm going, because this is new for me and I'm trying new things, and I hope you enjoy it. Other than that, this is Matt signing off.